What if the difference between being overlooked and being unforgettable comes down to how well you tell your story? In a world flooded with content, many of it AI content, strong branding isn't really just about visibility, but it's about clarity, credibility, and connection. Today's guest knows exactly how to make messages not only heard, but impossible to ignore. On today's episode, I'm joined by Joshua Altman, storyteller and founder of Beltway.Media, a DC-based communications firm helping everyone from startups to federal agencies cut through the noise. With more than 2 decades of experience and a background as a multimedia journalist at The Hill, covering high-stakes elections and federal policy, Joshua brings a rare mix of real-time insights and data-driven strategy. Now he's helping brands refine their voice, build credibility, and navigate both growth and high-pressure moments with confidence. From crafting brand stories to leveraging behavioral science and analytics, Joshua is redefining what modern communication leadership looks like. If you're looking to stand out, scale your message, or future-proof your brand, this is a conversation that you don't want to miss. Joshua, welcome to the show. You've gone from covering high-stakes political stories at The Hill to shaping brand narratives. How did that experience influence the way you approach storytelling in business today?
Thank you for having me. When I was at The Hill, I was a multimedia producer. I was doing digital production, video, web, coding, and that really influenced how we work at Beltway.Media. What we do is we look for ways to tell stories creatively. We look to use all the tools that are available to us. Technology tools, content tools, everything that's there. We think about how people get information 4 different ways. We call it a 4 languages model. What people read, see, hear, and experience. Read, pretty straightforward. What people read, what people see, things like podcasts, and experience is everything from experiential events to what people experience when they're reading versus listening, or watching a podcast versus listening to it, and how that affects what they're doing. We're very focused on that user, that consumer experience when they're engaging with content.
Wow, yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think it's really interesting how you take that whole approach. I feel like a lot of times in digital marketing, a lot of people focus on one area. So it's interesting that your company decides to kind of take a look at everything. I think we're seeing right now a big shift, at least from what people I've been talking to on the show, for a lot of digital content, of course, but I think there is that in-person connection that people are looking for too. So I feel like a lot of people are branching out into different areas of marketing. On Beltway's Media website, you mentioned discovering how a fractional chief communications officer can grow a business or a nonprofit. Can you share a little bit more about this and what that would look like for a business?
We focus on 2 main things: shaping perception and building and maintaining trust. What that means, it's an integrated, big picture view of how messaging impacts your reputation, your growth, and your stakeholder confidence. That means we're really looking at everything like you mentioned before. We're looking at how different channels amplify each other, how we can support that narrative, and that begins with authenticity. That builds trust. Trust translates into growth. Whether you're a nonprofit or a business, that trust is crucial. And that is what we're really focused on.
So when you think about it, though, in a working capacity, so what would it look like for a business to have a fractional chief communications officer? And how does that look like in terms of the business structure? How, hands-on is that role, or is it more something that your company would take and kind of run with?
It's a little different depending on the business, their position, their size. Mm-hmm. We come in often when a business is really looking to grow. They have a founder, a chief technical officer, a director of operations doing this communications function because they have no one else to do it.
Right.
It's not really their job. We're there, we're taking this off their plate. Sometimes they might also have a social media specialist. They might have someone in a lower level role, but they don't have someone dedicated in that leadership function. So that's what we're taking on. Sometimes they don't have someone in that other role doing social media support or email marketing. And in that case, we're going to take that on too. But exactly what that is for each business is really going to depend on where you are. Some businesses have 15 people that we're taking on. Some are more. Some are brand new startups, and it's the founders and they're bootstrapping, and we're coming in at a much earlier stage.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of different capacities which they can work with your company. I think we have a lot of small businesses that listen to this podcast, but obviously they're looking to expand. So if someone was a small business and they were looking to work with your company, what would that kind of look like for them?
First thing we're going to do is we're looking to look at you guys and do an audit of what you've done. Mm-hmm. We're going to look at the communications you have out there across what people read, see, hear, and experience.
Okay.
Oftentimes they have a social media page or 2, they have websites, maybe they have an email list they're using. They have something. How can we build on that? Because that's going to be the best starting point. Some people, especially the earlier stage startups, really don't have much. They have their website that they've launched. That's it. And we're starting with a much cleaner slate. But for more established businesses, maybe you've been in business 5, 10, 15 years, you're a family business in the second or third generation even, you have a lot. Especially if you're that family business, you've been around a while, you have some trust that people have already built up. How can we grow that? And we're going to build oftentimes a content calendar. We're going to look at all the different channels and how we can use that. And it's often going to be about personal stories. It's going to be about your business. It's going to be about being real and authentic. That is something that people are really craving right now with so much AI content out there, with so much automation. What we're seeing is authenticity rules. That is what's dominating. And we talk about this a lot in our recent newsletters. Authenticity is where you are building the most trust. It's how you are converting. It's what people are really looking for. So what we're going to do is look at ways that we can maximize that. And a lot of times it's simply shifting from using a corporate account, Acme Corp's Twitter account or Acme Corp's LinkedIn account, to John Smith's LinkedIn account and posting it from that personal page. That we've seen across businesses make a huge difference.
Wow. Yeah, that's great advice. I think the authenticity piece, like you mentioned, is huge right now, especially with so much AI content going out into the market. It helps people connect with your brand in such a deeper level. I feel like people feel way more connected to a brand when they actually see the people behind it. And one thing you talk a lot about, especially on your website, is really cutting through that noise. So would you say that authenticity is the main piece or practice that a startup or a content creator should start to do when they're trying to stand out in a saturated market?
It's one thing you can do and it's important, but you can still be the noise. We tell people be the signal, not the noise.
Okay.
And what that means is don't post just to post. Don't comment just to comment. Don't put out 5 videos a day because you read online you should put out 5 videos a day.
Yeah.
If they're 5 useful videos and they provide value and they help people and they achieve your goal, do it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely do that. But if you're just doing it to check the box because you read on some website that that's what you should do, you're not providing value. You're not being useful. And ultimately, that does hurt you in these algorithms that we are all beholden to, because then you're not getting engagement and people aren't finding you useful, and then your content isn't shared as much.
Yeah.
So that's a balance you need to find. Post what feels right, post what is beneficial, and that helps you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. I think often right now we're seeing that quality over quantity piece in social media marketing specifically. Like you said, there's so much advice out there as to like how often to post, when to post, best times a day, or how many times a day. And it can feel really overwhelming, I think, for a lot of small businesses and creators. Like they feel like they have to get content out there. So it might not be the best content that is really aligned with their brand. They're kind of just sharing to share. And I really like that you touched upon that, like being the signal, not the noise, adding in your feedback, adding in value to your audience is more important than just getting a message out there. So that's some really great advice. At Beltway.Media, you combine data analytics with behavioral science and creativity. How would you say these 3 elements work together to build a brand that truly connects with their audience?
The data helps inform the behavioral science, and it's all underpinned by creativity.
Okay.
So what we're doing is often looking at how people react to what we're putting out there. We do a lot of content marketing. As you've noticed, it's kind of where we are focused, because everything is content these days. And what we're doing is looking at how people are receiving that. So if we're doing emails for people, if your audience uses a lot of these email platforms, you get a lot of analytics there. Mm-hmm. We worked with a client, we came in, they already had a newsletter, it was established, it had a good following. It wasn't converting into sales. Okay. It wasn't doing what they wanted to do. So we put out a couple more exactly like they had been doing, just to really establish that baseline of us doing it, not changing the format, not changing the content, not changing the style. Then we started seeing where people were clicking. They weren't scrolling, but all the calls to action were at the bottom of the email beneath the scroll. Mm-hmm. All the buys were beneath the scroll. We moved some things, and we don't have to do it all at once. This is the internet. You could make a change today, make another one tomorrow. It'll go out each time a little different. So then we started making changes one at a time. We moved the buys to the top of the email for courses, for books that they were selling. Book an appointment, all that got moved. People started clicking because they were seeing it right away. Mm-hmm. And that was a little change we could make that really made that newsletter a lot more valuable. So we were looking at that behavior through the lens of the data that we had. Right. And when it comes to the creativity, how do we write it? You'll read a lot of information out there about, well, blue boxes get more clicks than red boxes, and then it's green text. And the problem with that is eventually people become numb to one of those, and then another one becomes more reliable. We're always playing with those sorts of things. We're looking at creative subject lines, not spammy subject lines, not things that are going to trick you, but creative, engaging. We're looking at text that'll draw you in. Images, what people read and see are very important. So we're looking at creative images that draw you in, videos that will get your attention, and then get you to take the action. We're always focused on that. It's going to take 7, 14, 21 touch points sometimes for someone to make a buy decision or to make that appointment. That's a lot that people need to see you. And it's across platforms. It's going to be across emails and social media. And if you're in person in a store, if you have trucks on the road, seeing your truck, that's a lot of touch points that people have to get. So we're always looking at how to make those creative and stand out so they don't eventually fall into the back.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I think I really like how you mentioned here how you're looking at how people react specifically for each of your clients' businesses. Often, I think we can see so much information about what will perform best or what the algorithm is looking for or what's the latest trend to jump on, and it might not work for everyone's business. So I think, taking a second to look at the analytics or a step back to look at your own specific analytics, I think is really helpful, and kind of just a little reminder that I think we all kind of need sometimes. I think it's really helpful too that you mentioned, when you look at different areas of an email even, or you look at specific areas of marketing, it's really easy to get wrapped up in creating a lot of the content that you forget to kind of make those little changes. Like you said, I think that's why it's really helpful to work with a company like yours, where you're able to kind of brainstorm with a team and people are able to add their own feedback into it, because often when you create something yourself, you might not pick up on those little things. It might not be that you might not have realized that you're putting your buy button all the way down at the end of your email, and that's why people aren't clicking. It might just take an outside opinion to kind of come in and add that feedback. So I think that's really insightful. So you've worked across both public affairs and private sector branding. How should founders think differently about communication when the stakes are high or maybe during moments of crisis? And then also, in moments of public scrutiny, what are the first steps a brand should take to protect its reputation and to help maintain that trust?
The answer to both of those is the same thing.
Okay.
Take a second and breathe. Think before you act, because you cannot go back and undo that first statement, that first action that you do. If you take an hour to put it out instead of putting it out in 15 minutes because you reread it, you think about it a little more, that's great. That's what you need to be doing in those situations. What we also do with people is we practice this. We have crisis communications plans. They're like fire drills. We practice it, we put it on a shelf, we hope we never have to use it for someone.
Right.
But with each business, we are developing a crisis communications plans. We are having drafts that are ready to go, fill in the blanks for different situations. Sometimes there are a lot of blanks in these that have to be filled in. The blank could be 2 paragraphs that are the specific details. Right. But we know what your threats are. What are the basic crises? If you deal with, PII, if you're a healthcare practice, you're going to be dealing with patient data. A data breach is something that you're going to have to be prepared for. And oftentimes you have legal obligations with that. We talk about this with the clients. We're going to talk about it from the communication standpoint, but we're also going to bring in your lawyers. We are going to make sure that you are compliant with this all the way through, because you don't want to have something 6 months from now find out you put out a statement that wasn't compliant. So we're very careful, especially with those types of industries. Not everyone is dealing with that kind of PII, that personally identifiable information.
Right.
Sometimes, the crisis is you got a really bad review from a local influencer, from a national influencer. How do you respond to that? Should you respond to that? Right. Can you respond to everything? We hope not, because you're getting so many reviews and so much business that you can't respond to it all. But that's what we're going to be looking at and taking that moment and thinking about before we act.
Yeah, that's some really great advice. I think having that plan ahead of time, like you mentioned, is really helpful for so many businesses. So that way you kind of avoid that stress, like you say, where you just want to react or respond, and having a backup plan or a way to at least say, okay, we're going to take a second, we're going to prepare, look at what we've already prepared, and to be able to work with your team on that, I think is really important for a lot of businesses out there. I also like that you mentioned being really strategic about what you're replying to, how often you're replying to things, if you reply to anything. So I think something that comes up, especially within, digital marketing, is like you said, if you get a bad review, if someone doesn't have a great experience at, your business, like, do you respond to that? How should you respond to that? I think that's often like that public relations side of marketing, that it's very different than just creating content and sharing it. There's a whole other side to it, which is, like you said, the reaction piece. And I think that that's a really great way to go about it. Definitely having that preparation ahead of time, so that way it's not so stressful in the actual moment. So as we wrap up this episode, if there are entrepreneurs that are trying to position themselves as thought leaders, what are the most effective ways you would say to build that credibility and to attract the right audience? So whether they're looking for more consumers or investors, like, what are some ways that they can make themselves appear as thought leaders in the field that they're in?
We've mentioned both of these already a little bit. The first is authenticity.
Yep.
Use that and build trust. That is going to be the first and most important way that you're going to establish that credibility. Not spamming 10 posts a day is a great way to show that we are focused on what we are focused on, and that is our core message. And that goes into the second part, which we also mentioned before, which is be the signal, not the noise. Be strategic, not voluminous.
Right.
Really focus on your message. And that's why we do these content calendars, is we're making sure that we're hitting all your messages the right way at the right times throughout a week, a month, a year. And we're looking at this even a year in advance. If we know you have the annual conference, the annual expo every year in February, we're going to be planning for that a year in advance and building up to it. Now, it might just be a point on the calendar 12 months in advance that we know about. But as we get closer and we know the topics, then we could start really focusing on content that is related to it. So that's why we really build these thoroughly and far in advance.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I think the authenticity is really important right now, and especially in that founder-led content. I think using founder-led marketing is something that's been coming up a lot on this show, about a great way to position your business and to make it stand out amongst a lot of the content that's seemingly being created by AI, or it's very obviously AI. So if someone is looking to position themselves, maybe they're a CEO of a company and they are a thought leader, how would you recommend that they use AI, if they use AI, in the content creation piece? And are there any tips or advice that you would say you can use it here, but maybe refrain from using it in other areas?
Use it. It's a tool, but that's all it is. It's a tool. If you were to give me a hammer, you would get maybe a birdhouse that's slanted. If you give a master craftsman a hammer, you'll get a great house that you could live in for 100 years or more. That's the difference with AI. It's just a tool. If you use it well and responsibly and you're thinking about it, you could get a great result. If you put in a prompt and just take the result and post it on your LinkedIn, we're going to know. Right. And that's going to diminish that trust because it's not authentic.
Right.
Use it. It's really great at creating drafts as long as you edit it. It's even better at creating outlines because then you're adding in a lot more yourself. It's excellent at research as long as you verify all the results.
Right.
It does have a tendency to hallucinate. So verify everything that comes out of there. But we've used it for research because we're checking market data on 25, 30 cities. And that's just running Google searches, really. 25, 30 cities, public health data, vital statistics. It's great at that. And it did that faster than any human could do. And then the humans could focus on verifying the data and also doing the stuff that humans are better at, creating the visuals, telling the story, writing the text.
Right.
That's where you could use AI, and that's where you use the people to really get that message across. Yeah,
I think that's some great advice. I feel like there's so many opportunities to use it, but it shouldn't take over your marketing strategy or your content calendar. I think it's a great way to like you said, come up with drafts, help with maybe editing or coming up with different responses or things like that. But I feel like the more you put into AI, like the prompts and making it more personable or able to tell the story you actually put into AI and have it, maybe worded it a little bit differently, that I think is great and a really great tool to make things a little bit more seamless. But I do think there's so much value, like you said, in being authentic and having the story come from you. I think is huge, especially with founder-led businesses. So that's some really great advice. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. This has been a really great conversation. I'm really excited to share this message out out there. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and marketers will be really interested to learn more about it. We touched on a lot of different topics today. I think the PR side of things is really interesting. I really like the idea, like you said, having that plan in place. I think a lot of businesses will benefit from that. But as we wrap up the show, if anybody wants to work with you, I'll definitely add your Beltway.Media website in the show notes. But if you could just walk us through really quickly as we wrap up, just like the process of someone looking to work with your company. Do you do a consult call? Like, what does that look like?
Starts with a consult call. We do a quick chat, figure out what you need, where you are, what you have, what your goals are. That's really important. We're also going to ask, what don't you want to do? What are you really uncomfortable with? Mm-hmm. Because if you're visibly uncomfortable going on camera and talking, it's not going to come out well.
Right.
Now, that is authentic. There are benefits to that, but if you freeze up, we're not going to put you on camera if that's something you really don't want to do.
Yeah.
So we're going to ask what those actual really limits are that you do not want to cross, because that's important. We're going to ask if there are any things that are sensitive. You have proprietary data, you have PII, you have things that you just have to be very aware of. This way, when we're building a plan, we're starting from the very beginning, knowing what you have, your bounds that you have to work within. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to ask about creativity. What do you really want to do? What do you want it to look like? Do you need a total brand refresh? Is that what you're calling us about? Do you have things you love, things you hate? We'll get all of that. Then we'll start building a plan and we go from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate your time today. And I look forward to sharing this episode out with everyone. I think it's going to be a lot of great takeaways.
Thank you for having me.